now for us to actually get to the point to hearing what did it actually mean for some of those farmers who were having to participate in these groups and what it really meant from a practical perspective. We're going to welcome up Emma Crutchley and Stephen Nichol to the stage. As they're getting themselves all mic'd up, I'll introduce them both. So Emma is farming with her husband Kyle and their two children, Evelyn and Reuben, at Puketoi Station in the Maniatoto, Central Otago. Puketoi is a diverse, integrated family farming business across sheep, beef breeding and finishing, beef genetics and arable production. The property ranges from high altitude tussock country to more intensive flats and includes about 450 hectares of irrigation. Alongside the work that Emma does on farm every day, she has also held several governance roles and is the current future director of Scales Corporation and has also been an integral part of National Lamb Day. Emma is also an appointed member of the AgriZero New Zealand Farmer Focus Group. Steve, he owns Makarara Station, a sheep and beef property at Clark's Junction in Otago, running somewhere between 8,000 and 9,000 stock units on any given year. He and his partner also have some areas set aside for conservation and timber forestry, and then Steve's also very busy operating his own advisory business, helping farmers to navigate farm systems, financial analysis and farm planning. So look, it's my absolute pleasure to bring both Steve and Emma up onto the stage. We're going to hear from them briefly to share some of their insights from participating in the research that Lee has just told us about, and then we're going to try and have some more conversations with them both. So I'm not sure who's going to kick off first with a little bit of an introduction.
Oh, I'm attached to a microphone already.
Yeah, you can sit. Make yourself at home.
So we got approached, it's nice coming off the back of Lee's presentation, we got approached 2022. Erica rang me to float the idea of a farmer-led collective to look at greenhouse gases in agriculture or reduction on farm. And I floated it in, firstly in the Maniatoto where I live, and at that stage we already had a large catchment project going, and there was little interest in starting another one because everyone was probably tapped out with the first one. And so from there we went, we floated it in the Mid-Tairi because Mid-Tairi had a collective but they didn't have any funded projects at that stage, is that right, Steve? Mm-hmm. And so it was a little bit more of a draw in there. And then so I managed to stay part of the group based on the fact that we were all very similar in terms of how we farmed and the farm types. And in emissions reduction and the kind of things we were looking at, you don't have to be connected on farm. And from there, we formed a group, and I think the thing I remember the most is I think the first day, it was right in the middle of all the politics around He Waka Kanoa, and everyone came into the room and sat down and just went like this. And it was so political, and rightly so, it was so political at that stage. And we kept coming back, I suppose, and when we kept coming back, there was a little bit of attrition. Some people decided it wasn't for them, and we sort of narrowed it down to probably about 10? Probably about 10, 9 to 10 farms. And as a group, we cover the total farm area of all the farms combined is just over 30,000 hectares, and a lot of extensive high altitude, less irrigation. We've probably got one of the highest amounts of irrigation, and across sheep, beef, deer, a little bit of forestry, and that's about it, finishing breeding. Do you want to add there? From there, the conversation sort of started to evolve.
Yeah, I guess from our point of view, we just started a Mid-Tairi wide catchment group, and that was basically a reaction to the freshwater regulations that were coming towards us. Also, the Otago Land and Water Plan, which was on top of those, and we had gained a little bit of momentum, but it was starting to stifle a little bit. We weren't really getting traction within the community. This project came across our table. To be fair, I don't think we took it on because it was greenhouse gases. We thought it would be just a good opportunity to get the committee or the community together to try and build up a bit of momentum within our area. I actually thought for a start it was probably a really tough one to start off with, a really wicked problem that farmers were going to struggle to engage with because the impact of greenhouse gases wasn't obvious like it is for some of the other problems like freshwater. You can't see it. And the way I saw it is that if we stopped farming in our area, we removed all our stock, greenhouse gas problem would still be there, but we would potentially solve some of our freshwater problems. So it was a really hard problem to get our head around. It needed a long time for us to learn as a group what that actually meant from our region, but also from our individual farms as well. So just to go into a bit more detail about our catchment. Our catchment is 80% sheep and beef, 10% conservation, and there's a little bit of dairy on some of the basins. Very limited in terms of what other farming uses we can do because we have some pretty significant limitations around our main resources, which is our climate. Emma's average rainfall's 300 mils or something like that,
350.
and within the other end of the group we get up to about maybe 700. So it's still a fairly low pool of water that we've got to work with. About 5% of our collective has irrigated land, and that's not likely to change very much. We have reasonably short growing seasons and a very temperate climate. So when it came to looking for obvious solutions, they weren't there. So 30,000 hectares within the collective. The numbers changed over the years. We lost some big farms, so actually that was probably less than what we started with. The average size of our farms was 3,000 hectares, and our average stocking rate was 5 stock units a hectare. And those numbers are really important when you're thinking about greenhouse gases. As Lee mentioned about the relationship between feed intake, production and stocking rate, and the methane output. When you have a very low stocking rate, it's very, very tough to make any significant changes to your greenhouse gas profile when methane makes up nearly 80% of your greenhouse gas profile. So I don't know if we want to stop there for a second.
I might come in with a question here because I'm really keen to explore what it was like for you both being involved in this collective group. And I guess if we take some of the lessons or the finding that Lee shared with us, and one of those is that working together and doing it by ourselves. I'm really interested in how you found that from each of your perspectives around, was there safety in numbers? Was there value from working with like-minded people? Was it a safe space to actually push back and test some of those ideas? So I'm really keen to hear about that. And I'm also interested in you perhaps sharing of the findings of the research. What was the one that surprised you the most?
Let me do the first one.
Yeah, you go for it.
Okay. So I think when you take away the politics and you're in a group of people that are just interested and curious and learning about a challenge, then you start leaning into it and you start learning. And when you start learning about it, you start, all this other stuff starts to compound. And I think you build trust. And I think Lee's touched on what was probably, I'm flicking to the surprise, but one of the most surprising learning out of it for me is that a lot of us have been in rooms where you get a facilitator where they dictate the direction of the group. And for me, I guess I learnt is that's not actually facilitating, and I have to be really careful because the facilitator's sitting in the room. I don't want to give him too much kudos. Is that when you stand back and let it be farmer-led, and although that might be incredibly clunky for a start, and you wonder why, some days you wonder why you're going. It was a 40-minute or 35 to 40-minute drive for me to our meetings, and you feel like you're going nowhere, and then all of a sudden it just kind of clicks because you're learning all this stuff, and then you're starting to dictate what direction you'll go based on what you're learning. Whereas if someone's dictating you the direction you will go, then you're not actually learning anything. And I've been in a situation where it's predetermined what the outcome we're going to have to come to is. I just don't want to be there. I can't, it's something you leave because you're not interested. But when you get the chance to learn and then follow your pathway from that, then it was a privilege to be part of.
Yeah, I would add to that a good facilitator will break down your unconscious bias that you have on a particular subject, and you have to understand with a farm-led group, it doesn't mean that you don't need a good facilitator, you absolutely do. And the trajectory of a group when it's farmer-led is not necessarily linear. It's not going to follow the path that you think it's going to take. And you've got to have the ability to reframe what you're trying to do and restructure that to make sure that you stay relevant and engaged within the subject. For instance, our group, which I would say at the start was just a group of people that were trying to build trust and relationship, and that probably took, I reckon, a couple of years to get to the stage where we could talk actually honestly and openly. By the time we'd finished now last year, we barely mentioned the word greenhouse gases. It was all about the collective, and it was more about natural capital and how we could create value out of that than it was of the linear subject of greenhouse gases by itself. So that would have never happened if it wasn't farmer-led, in my opinion.
No.
And anything that surprised you from where you started to where you got to?
Probably just what Steve said, like it wasn't about emissions in the end. It evolved into how do we make our farming businesses more profitable, and that is a topic that engages anyone. And because we were still actively chasing by profitability, that gives us the ability to lower our or create efficiencies and lower our emissions more, then it was still part of the topic and it still fell in the zone.
So if we take that and we think what Lee told us about, some of that research was starting to look at, what are the more disruptive impacts or that transformational solutions piece, Lee's then shared that there's perhaps not that many silver bullets and reaching those transformational solutions will be challenging. What are what is one thing that each of you have taken from that group that you're now looking to apply in terms of a change piece on farm that allows you to continue to actually shift the dial around how you manage the change piece, but ensuring that profitability remains front of mind?
I think for us there's no obvious change pieces that I saw, but there is an opportunity to build strength through the collective to create a story that will resonate with people. We, in our last year, most of the momentum was actually looking towards the market and seeing if there was any opportunities within the market that would align with our values and our story. And what we found was actually very limited in terms of what was out there. Transformational change, that was a tough one for me, but because what we found, as Lee pointed out, was whenever we looked at real change in terms of reducing methanes, we were looking at land use change. And land use change for an area that can only sustain 5% irrigation generally entered us in the world of exotic forestry. And then in an environment where you have a low rainfall environment, if you put up to 10% of your catchment in exotic forestry, you basically alter your actual, what you should be counting is your natural capital. Water resources were going to reduce significantly if we started putting forestry in every gully in the catchment. And that had an impact all the way down to the coast. So one of the big things that I found was that the market didn't seem like it was ready for it, and we're actually in the process of reframing what our purpose actually is. Well, Phil's trying to get that out of us now, so I'll leave it at that.
Mine would be the capability and confidence in business, like you always have it in business, but you learn more beyond the farm gate. I think in New Zealand we're traditionally, from our structural history, like through the leaving the EU or the connection we had to Britain that happened in the 70s and then the 80s, we're very, very focused on efficiencies behind the farm gate. What a lot of the learning we got is actually beyond that and how we connect to market. And there was a learning there around our structure. Our structure in New Zealand is very focused on the volume, even though we are rewarded for the value that we don't necessarily see. And we've heard a lot about that from Hamish. We are already getting the value in it. It's a market access thing. But because of the markets we're in around that volume, there is a challenge for us in creating value. And I think from there, for me personally, what that led to is you start to think about when we talk about how we stack things, well, we're thinking about how we stack value on farm, and that's not necessarily focused around how we change the red meat industry, because that's a discussion for another day. It's more around what can we do within our farming business to make it more lower cost, make it more efficient. And also there's a big focus at the moment, and we're pivoting a little bit into long-term investment, realising that there's a whole nother conversation here around double materiality, and that we're not only trying to reduce emissions, we're also trying to adapt to the impacts of climate change. And so that folds into it as well. So you're trying to look at a big, complex beast.
So on that, Emma, I'm guessing what you're telling me is greenhouse gas emissions might have been the reason that you came together, but actually when you get into it, it's a tangly web of all sorts of things, whether it's natural capital, biodiversity, water quality, profitability. It's just the mechanism for actually trying to solve some of these challenges collectively.
Yeah, and I think this is probably a little bit of a Lee moment, because he might have tried to offend everyone, which I don't think he did, but is that we talk a lot in New Zealand about the best in the world, and then we switched it to when we're nearly the best in the world, and I was like, well, that's actually a really poor business strategy. Why don't we start talking about what our competitive moat is? Like, what are we doing in our business that separates us in the markets we play in? And then how do we, and I'm stealing this from someone because it was a really good quote, I stole it from Andy Borland from Scales, is how do you put sharks in the moat? Because when you hear what our speakers this morning, was saying, is that that's how our point of difference is, that's how we're going to be set apart, because the sustainability stuff is what we're doing. The reality is it's market access, and we're really struggling to generate value from the input we're doing. So there's a limited ability of us to want to push further or to impact our profitability, because we know that at the end of the day we're getting paid exactly the same as the guy down the road who does nothing. So
to me, it's I think the conversation has gone more to resilience and risk management within our communities than greenhouse gases, because if we'd followed the greenhouse gas path, we would have destocked our farms. The resilience meant that we can focus actually on things like carbon dioxide, where we can electrify our farming communities, but it's going to make little impact on our greenhouse gas profile. So it's important to reframe that conversation to something that actually is viable on farm. So.
That's great. Look, I just want you all to join me in thanking Emma and Steve for sharing their insights and their story. So thank you both very much.